Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Bedtime Stories. Tonight we'll be reading Chapter 11 from Mr. Tweedy by Anne Marie Shilling. By 7 a.m., when I woke up to the tune of a chirping robin, once again I was happy just to be alive. Sunshine was streaming. It's my dog. Allie, come here. I'm going to remove your collar, okay? Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You're being good. Alright. At 7 a.m., when I awoke to the tune of a chirping robin, once again I was happy just to be alive. Sunshine was streaming through the trailer windows, the sky was pure crystal blue, and just beyond where we parked was a lovely field filled with wildflowers and myriads of butterflies. If ever there was a perfect setting for the release of a robin, this was it. When I looked over toward Mr. Tweedy, I found that he too was sharing the view and also shaking his feathers. Having already convinced myself that this morning I would see the last of this bird, I assumed he was thinking about that momentous event. However, before I would let him go, I decided that I would give him a special send-off meal. Knowing what he liked best, I fried up a slice of bacon, made him a tiny BLT sandwich. I even cut up a piece of his favorite American cheese, and the little so-and-so ate like a horse. Had I known that he wasn't going to leave, I would have dumped out a few Rice Krispies and gone back to bed. By the time that the children joined us, Mr. Tweedy had just finished his meal. He was chirping and scolding. To my mind, there was no question he wanted out. So once again, I explained to deaf ears what would happen shortly. And once again, Dave calmly announced, "He won't leave us." Even Kathy, who had been non-committal before, was beginning to agree. This was all wrong. They must face reality. "All right, Mr. Tweedy, out," I said as I opened the door. There was a mad rush of wings, and the kids followed. Sick at heart, I stayed inside to fix breakfast, but soon the babbling sound of voices drew me to the door. Of all things, Dave and Kathy were chasing butterflies, and Mr. Tweedy was helping them. First, he would hitch a ride on David's head as my son ran in pursuit. Nearing the butterfly, a robin would zoom off for an enthusiastic pass at it, then fly over to Kathy's head. Back and forth he flew, while I watched in fascination. Suddenly, all three came tearing back to the trailer. "We gotta have nets, Mom," Dave panted. "Mr. Tweedy loves those butterflies, but he's not much good at catching them, and he won't eat them with the wings on." I groaned. Mr. Tweedy had always been particular about food. Mudworms had to be chopped, flies didn't appeal to him unless they were squashed, and given a choice, he much preferred the type of food I had served him for breakfast. So now the fuss budget was demanding his butterflies de-winged? Well, it wouldn't be for long. Before nightfall, surely he would fly away. To appease the children, after rummaging through both of the clothes closets, I finally found my only pair of pant stretchers, which I invariably use for drying David's dress pants. As much as I hated to part with these handy ironing savers, I could find nothing else which could possibly serve as substitutes for butterfly nets. So, albeit reluctantly, I attached a plastic bag to the end of each stretcher, and in short order the trio were back in the field. What a three-ring circus they had with that unpredictable little bird. Far from flying away from him, he wouldn't let them out of his sight, and all day long he kept on with his shenanigans. Of course, still being convinced that eventually he would return to the world from which he came, I made umpteen stops to give him his opportunity. Not that I wanted him to leave, but simply because I dreaded the ordeal and wanted to be done with it. And the longer he remained with us on this trip, the more difficult it would be for the children to adjust to their loss. Actually, coping with a touring robin wasn't that difficult. Coping with his avid audiences was something else. For no matter where we stopped, cars would line up and strangers would come to me to ask questions. "What kind of bird is that? How did you train him?" One man even asked quite sincerely, "Are you folks connected with the circus?" At that point, the children were acting like such idiots with their bird in the field that I almost answered, "No, we're connected with a lunatic asylum." Naturally, I couldn't blame the strangers for being curious. I didn't even blame them for coming over to me and striking up a conversation. However, as the morning wore on, combined with the questioning, I got more and more tired from the suspense. Is he or isn't he going to leave us? And then, of course it was hot, and the children were thirsty, so naturally I'd stop and let them get drinks from the trailer. 10 minutes later, they need to do what comes naturally. If I made 12 miles in a stretch, I was lucky. We didn't miss a single service area, rest area, or even a widened spot on the road. Hence, driving that day was a long series of stops and starts, and I was ready to call a halt long before we left Massachusetts. To be even more truthful, I was ready to turn around and go home. But then after one of these stops, I got such a kick out of the antics of that silly Robin that I got a second wind and managed to get through the day. The incident occurred right after lunch. As I said before, I had become very tired during the morning hours, being unable to rest at any of the numerous stops due to all the questioning strangers. Even at lunchtime, they wouldn't leave me alone, knocking on the trailer door when I wanted to rest. So after lunch, I drove a short way down the road, finding the perfect solution to my problem. A field that was deep enough so that the children could play in with their bird without drawing the attention of passing motorists. Undisturbed, I might get a catnap. This worked out fine. No one stopped. I must have dozed for 10 minutes, and then I called the children back. Of course, this was the first time they had gone any distance from the trailer. The grass was nice and tall, and Dave came running, dragging the net behind him, over quite a long distance. This was July. The nets were sturdy, non-porous plastic. As he started toward me, I remember thinking, that bag won't last long that way. But that's all I thought. We had driven about 2 miles down the road when Kathy let out an ungodly scream. I had no idea what was wrong with her. At this point, I must say a few words about my younger daughter. Although she has absolutely no fear of snakes, mice, or other things that make little girls screech, she is petrified of anything which might cling to her or her clothing, like ants, grasshoppers, crickets. Out in the field, she had very carefully circumvented the high grass which Dave, being a boy, plowed through. And while she was in the field, where the grass was short, she was constantly running or watching to make sure nothing hopped onto her. So now you must know what she was screaming about. I didn't find out until I stopped the car, and then I saw, not 1, not 2, not even 10, but dozens and dozens of tiny everythings. Ants, crickets, grasshoppers, all mostly in the baby stages, but none the less potent. They were climbing up the walls, across the ceiling, across the dashboard, along the floor. No wonder she screamed as if she lost her mind. And believe me, for several moments, even after we'd stopped and she'd brushed and brushed off every part of herself and her clothing, I still wasn't sure she would be all right. On one hand, it was a very serious matter. On the other, it was a riot watching a robin chase those little guys all over the place. And of course, Dave, being a born teaser with no medical considerations on his mind, thought the whole thing the most priceless joke that had ever happened. When he doubled up, roaring with laughter, I didn't know whether to join him or spank him. Anyway, Mr. Tweedy saved the day. For miles and miles and days on the road, whenever another crawling or jumping thing came out from under the seat, he was right there looking for the tasty morsel. When it came to picking the pesky things off my bad leg, where I couldn't reach, he was a godsend. After this episode, we didn't go too much further. In all, we had only 175 miles, finally stopping for the night at the far rear of a service area past Albany, New York. However, even though we had stopped earlier than necessary and it was still light, the children didn't stay outdoors. After supper, they took sponge baths and got into bed. They wanted to read up on all the different butterflies they had collected, but they didn't read long. After an hour or so of reading out loud to me, all the while I was trying to get on with writing up my travelogue, they finally dropped into an exhausted sleep. All the chasing around, catching butterflies had made their young limbs weary. I too was tired and could have fallen asleep without any urging. However, I still had to finish my writing, and furthermore, what they had read to me had been rather interesting. I had never realized that the monarch butterflies migrate to the south as soon as the weather turns chilly. In fact, I had thought all butterflies merely lived and died in whatever area their predecessors happened to be, spending their lifespan in a limited space. Thus, I was fascinated to learn that there were certain trees in Pacific Grove, California, which play host to thousands of migrating monarch butterflies every year, and that there are even signs for directing tourists to these specific butterfly trees. Thus, not until after the children were asleep did I finally get down to my travelogue, and then there was so much record that I thought I would never get done with it. All the antics of Mr. Tweedy alone were enough to fill pages. The way he was always first one to come back to the car when I had called the children, the way he would hop frantically along the back of my seat, cocking his head to watch for them. If they dawdled too long, back he would fly to them, never letting them out of his sight. Oh, he was the limit. When the trio had an audience, I really should have passed around a collection plate. I could have made a mint in no time. Anyway, during the first hour of writing, Mr. Tweedy just sat on one leg, keeping watch over me with one eye open. Then he began to fidget, changing positions, looking down at me, yawning, and then scolding a bit. It was absolutely ridiculous. However, by the 12th time he carried on like this, I finally took the hint and went to bed, thanking him once again for catching all those horrible bugs. And that ends the reading for Chapter 11 from Mr. Tweedy. Tune in tomorrow for Chapter 12. Let's end with a bedtime prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for everything that you've given us. Thank you for the blessings in our lives. And we pray through the things that might cause us worry or might cause us fear. And Lord, I pray that all of us get a good night's sleep tonight and that we wake up tomorrow feeling refreshed and rejuvenated and ready to take on the day. Lord, I pray that you show us your peace and mercy in a whole new way this next day and in this night, even in our sleep. Lord, I pray these things in Jesus' precious holy name. Amen. Good night.